the mucker. Well, of course, we've made death with all kinds of ghouls. We've invented dreadful afterlives. I mean, the Christian version of heaven is as abominable as the Christian version of hell. Nobody in church forever. we've invented dreadful afterlives. I mean, the Christian version of heaven is as abominable as the Christian version of hell. Nobody wants to be in church forever. death. This is tremendously important to think about. Death is swept under the carpet in our culture. In the hospital, they try to keep you alive from utter desperation. They won't nose the mockery. Well, of course, we've made death howl with all kinds of ghouls. We've invented dreadful afterlives. I mean, the Christian version of heaven is as abominable as the Christian version of hell. Nobody wants to be in church forever.
Mic check.
Maybe you could just leave. Maybe
We're live. Everyone can hear us, by the way.
Maybe Clint's a good guy. Oh man, people heard me say Clint's a good guy.
Yeah, they're hearing you right now, dude. 25 seconds.
When your kids say they hungry in the store, gotta feed them. You gotta stop and you gotta feed them. Because one thing about me, when I'm hungry, you gonna make sure you eat. You gotta eat. Ain't that right? So when y'all hear y'all kids crying, just stop. Just take a break. And get them a snack. It's the only way to get them to shut up. That's it. It's simple.
Y'all see they quiet as a bee.
Hey, quiet. It's okay to take a break, y'all.
I mean, yeah.
It's okay. It's better than listen to y'all kids cry. And to the people that wanted to see the kids, here they are.
Y'all always asking about the kids. Here they are.
America. I am more offended that they were eating GMO potatoes and seed oils myself. Welcome back, beautiful and amazing human beings. My name's Luke Radowski here of the best politicalshow.com. As of course, we are going to be going live for the next 2 hours with some very interesting human beings here in studio. As of course, we have a lot of crazy news to talk about, as we just got the breaking news that President Joe Biden will be acting decisively and committing U.S. military action in the Middle East. What's going on here? As of course, a lot of people are calling for a full all-out war with Iran. Well, time will only tell, but we're going to be breaking down all the latest developments, as of course there's a lot of news with Taylor Swift, with Donald Trump, with Israel, with Palestine. So many things to talk about. We're going to be talking about all of that, plus the latest news in a conversation that you guys actively get to participate in. And one way to participate in it is by signing up to LukeUnfiltered.com. You could sign up for just less than $8 a month, and you get the ability to actually call in to the show, as well as almost daily video reports only available for you as members. Another way to participate is, of course, through mysuperchat.com, with your super chats actually showing up on screen. And of course, we will be reading any and all Rumble rants, YouTube super chats, as of course they are critically important towards sustaining and growing this independent media operation. This, as of course, we have some very interesting people in studio that we're going to get to in just a little bit, especially after their cameras are framed right by Clint here, who is going to make sure that they are framed correctly. So please make sure to share this broadcast with your friends and family members, as this conversation is going to be very interesting for the next 2 hours. Joining us for this conversation is the one, the only, Ian Crossland. Ian, who are you for the people who might not know you?
I'm the craziest motherfucker on the planet. What's happening?
Family-friendly show here.
Mother lover. Hey, if you don't know me already, which you should, I'm one. Okay, it's family friendly. I'm co-host of Timcast IRL Monday through Friday on YouTube at 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'm a musician. I'm an actor. I'm a co-founder of Minds.com. I'm all over the place. Good to see you. Good to be here, Luke.
Seamus snuck in here literally at like 1 o'clock in the morning. Was it 1 o'clock in the morning?
He
literally broke in at 1 o'clock in the morning,
Yeah.
and I see him sleeping on the couch here, and I'm like, yeah, I guess this guy's here. This guy, who are you? How would you introduce yourself?
My name's Seamus Coughlin. I would introduce myself as Luke Rukowski's best friend and mentor, who taught him everything that he knows about running a podcast. I'm happy to be here so that the audience can get a bit of a picture of where Luke learned his craft.
Yeah, your podcast on Rumble was really top notch. There,
what
really
convinced me, yeah.
just breakthrough stuff that really was pioneering. As of course, we're also.
Why are you laughing? That's true. All that's
As
true.
of course, we're also at the Rumble section of this broadcast. We're also going to be announcing our anti-Beanie Man coalition.
That's right.
And describing how the
Well,
Beanie Man
hold
has
on.
hurt all of us in many different ways. Right?
I would never call it that, but the reality is we did feel there was a need for a group therapy session about the ways that Tim has hurt our feelings over the years.
I've never looked at iron rods the same since.
He just he's really, really, really
He's a strange guy.
hurt our feelings.
He
I'll leave
has
it at that.
offended all of us,
The
and
Daily
we all have
Beast
grievances against them
article is coming out
that
tomorrow.
we are going to be organizing and speaking out against later on in this broadcast. Beanie Man, watch out. Clint's here too.
We got, this is the fifth chair IRL roundtable. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Clint Russell, host of Liberty Lockdown, co-host of Tower Gang, co-host of the bestpoliticalshow.com, which, by the way, if you haven't already, you need to be picking up your phone, going to your favorite podcatcher, whatever that is, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get them, and searching Best Political Show, and then subscribing. Thank you very much.
Hey everyone, this is Steph. WeAreChange, ready to go.
We already got the first super chat from I'm Not Your Buddy Guy saying, update from Commie Canada. It appears the Liberal and NDP are trying to fortify our elections with increased access to ballots, aka mail-in ballots. Very interesting, as of course we're also in a very tumultuous election cycle here inside of the United States that soon could be met with a larger geopolitical international conflict in the Middle East, as we are getting the latest reports that President Joe Biden will be authorizing U.S. military action in the Middle East. Now, what exactly is this specific action. We do not know yet, but we do know that it is going to be in retaliation against the drone attack that happened in Jordan that took the lives of 3 U.S. service members, injuring 36 others. As of course, we now will be awaiting to see the actions that are going to be committed, as we're getting some reports that have not been verified that the targets will be Iranian proxies and possibly even Iran or its infrastructure itself, as there's some people claiming that there's going to be cyber attacks also being launched on the facilities of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. Is this true? We do not know yet, as of course we all await to see the actions by the U.S. government. As of course, U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken had this to say just moments ago.
I would argue that we've not seen a situation as dangerous as the one we're facing now across the region since at least 1973.
Yeah, and if you remember in 1973, there was a lot of different geopolitical upheaval during that time period, as of course the United States has been meddling in Middle Eastern politics for a very long time. And now, how are we going to be addressing this situation? Well, I don't know. What do you guys think is going to be happening here?
I don't like that. I'll tell you what I think is going to happen. I guess what I don't like that one guy thinks he has the authority to command military presence. That's called a dictatorship. We don't live in that. So, Joe, give it to Congress. All right. Secondly, this use of the term kamikaze drone that they use, that's like making us think it's like Japan attacking Pearl Harbor. The kamikaze was the pilot. This was this was a missile that hit the base. Who fired the missile? I want to know. And I don't want to rush into military conflict as a result of this.
Yeah, you bring up a very good point, because as of yesterday, we were like, wait, who did this attack? Who's responsible here? Do we have any evidence highlighting and suggesting that it was Iran? As of course, many politicians already jumped the gun and they were like, we got to bomb Iran right away. Well, how do we know that this wasn't an accident? How do we know that this wasn't maybe Syria or Jordan or Israel or Turkey? Who knows what's really going on here? Because any and all possibilities should be, of course, fully investigated before launching another war. But war's pretty profitable, so it looks like they're probably going to be launching another war or escalating a proxy conflict that already exists.
Yeah, I think the escalation of a proxy conflict is probably more likely here, but I have no idea. I'm not going to sit here and make predictions. One thing I will say is, with all the things that you suggested, I mean, I have no idea about the possibility that it might be an accident, but also there is, of course, a very realistic possibility that it could be another group. We can't really trust the military-industrial complex. We know that they lie about these things all the time. We've had leaked information from whistleblowers about, the claim that poison gas was being used in Syria against citizens. I mean, so much of what we've been told at various intersections in the past about various attacks that have occurred and why we should go to war as a result of them have been totally untruthful. So we need to remain really skeptical about this.
Yeah. It's like they have a long history of false flagging people and lying in order to get them into war.
And even if it's not a false flag, right? They could just be lying about who did it.
Exactly.
Well, my frustration is there's never any evidence presented to the American people at all to demonstrate that Iran is actually responsible for these proxies. It's just a given. It's just a statement. It's an assertion. And if you were to question it, I would imagine they'd go like, we have intel reports and that's all you need to know. And it's like, well, I'm sorry, but that's not all I need to know at this point. You guys have given us intel reports that ended up in hindsight to be completely dead wrong. And I just wanted to point out real quick too, it was 1979 was the overthrow of the Shah. That was the Iranian Revolution. I don't know what 1973 is. I think that would be important to dig into to figure out. Like, well, I think that was when we were dealing with the oil crisis and
that was the Yom Kippur War in 1973.
There we go.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the connection there. He's connecting it between.
It was the Arab-Israeli conflict during the Cold War, as of course Israel already bombed Syria in response to this as well, according to some of the sources that we are seeing on the ground there as well. So. Yeah, the Yom Kippur War was, known as also the Ramadan War in October of 1973, and it was a major conflict with 4 Arab countries going against Israel.
Did you just say that Israel bombed Syria in response to a missile hitting an American base in Jordan?
I have that news report lined up that we're going to be getting into here in just a little bit. But those are the initial reports that we're seeing. As of course, Israel attacks Syria a lot. And even just recently, even just a few days ago, they were bombing specific targets inside of Syria, which is something that a lot of people point the finger at Israel for escalating tensions in the region and saying, yeah, could we not? Can we please not do this?
You know, there's also a factor that people need to consider here, which is that a very important piece of examining whether it's justified to go to war is not merely the injustice that's occurring or the way in which you've been attacked. It's a sober evaluation of your chances of success. And
what does that success mean?
What does that success mean, and how likely are we to reach it? And when you look at how the United States has intervened in the Middle East over the past 20, 30, 40, even 50 years, we're constantly told we need to go to war over X, Y, and Z. And then when we do, we either don't reach our goal, or we do reach something that could be said to be a goal, but we don't pull out at that time. We continue to stay over there. So I think we need to ask a very serious question here, which is if, and this is a strong if, the argument can be made that the injustice occurring here is lasting, grave, and certain enough for us to go to war over it, what's the plan? I mean, what is our goal here? What do we want to achieve? And at what point will we be able to say, okay, we've done that, our troops can come home? We don't have a very good track record of demonstrating that we have that capacity.
Troops coming home? Why?
Yeah,
when, of course, they
exactly.
could be out there protecting the U.S. petrodollar and other interests that are not really aligned to the American interests at all.
Well,
you know, how else is the military-industrial complex going to get their pound of flesh? How else are they going to get their record profits here?
And look, I mean, it's actually a very real question, especially when you consider inflation, when you look at what's been done to the U.S. dollar over the past 4 years, and when you examine the fact that we are closer than we have been in decades to losing our status as world reserve currency. There are actually really, really, really strong financial interests in pursuing war of this kind to preserve the value of the petrodollar. So I'm not really optimistic. And I'm also not optimistic, of course, based on what I was saying earlier about what the outcome of a war with Iran would be. I mean, Iran has a GDP about 7 times that of Iraq, and look what a quagmire that was. The idea that we, at this point as a nation, are strong enough to take on Iran when we are in so many ways culturally, economically, and socially in a far worse position than we were in 2001 when we couldn't handle war with Iraq.
Well, add to that the fact that we've sent so many of our munition stockpiles to Ukraine. Not to mention the fact that we've also spent 180, give or take, $1 billion in their defense, which was, I might add, a failure in large part because there was never any goal set. It was like, okay, we're going to, are we trying to topple Putin? Are we trying to just sustain the border of Ukraine? Because that ain't going to happen. That's already a done deal. So I think that once again, we are already looking at an empire in decline that now is wanting to jump off the cliff entirely. And I'm telling you guys, a war with Iran amounts to that.
Well, there's parasites that are feeding off of this country, and you know, I just want to kind of clear up some of the misnomers that I think you guys brought up here. You guys are saying there's no clear goals. We made a mistake here. I don't think that's true at all. I think they're deliberate actions that they know the ramifications, they know the consequences of, and they're deliberately doing it. With Iraq, they knew that there was going to be a vacuum of power that was going to create massive sectarian violence and also at the same time empower Iran to be a very powerful player in the region if they would have gotten rid of Saddam Hussein. Dick Cheney said this in the early 1990s. He knew what he was doing, and then when he was a part of the Bush administration, he committed to those plans. They got rid of Saddam Hussein. Iran became more powerful. ISIS grew out of that entire region, especially with all the Baptists that were kicked out of local government inside of Iraq. And then bada bing, bada boom, you have a global jihad effort that had terrorist attacks all over the Western world. That of course, was stamped by the United States military-industrial complex of approval that also gave them weapons, gave them intelligence, gave them communication, and gave them a crap ton of money, oil, and resources and said, hey, have at it. As of course, they were literally using almost identical CIA production like propaganda films, essentially cutting people's heads off and then glorifying that to the rest of the world. And again, everything that you saw there, I think was deliberate. I think right now, the war in Iran is a precursor to the war in Iraq. Iran is in a more powerful situation because of that war in Iraq, and I think they've been on the target list for a very long time, and now the United States has an opportunity to carry that out, and I think they might.
It's also important just to add in the fact that a wartime president almost always gets reelected. And I think that Biden is on the ropes, and they're looking at it like, well, if we can actually have a full-blown war, especially if it can be announced in the 6-7 month lead up to the election, that might actually be his saving grace, which is a dark thing to think about, but it's not outside the realm of possibility.
I certainly agree with you. It's definitely not outside the realm of possibility. And to respond to what Luke said a moment ago, I think that's a really powerful point, because even though, as I was describing, we haven't actually met our foreign policy goals, I think there really is something to the lens of analysis where you say the purpose of a system is the thing that it does and not the thing that we are told it will do or that it's supposed to do. And so when you look at the military industrial complex, you see that a small handful of people end up becoming very wealthy. Certain parts of the world end up being destabilized. People who we are more confident will represent American interests end up in power there. And also rebel groups that we fund end up becoming a serious enough threat for us to have to go to war with them later and thus continue the cycle. Yeah, I think there's something to be said for the idea that this is all intentional. But regardless, when they try to sell these wars to the American people, the suggestion is there's a good enough reason for us to go to war, and so we should just go to war. There's never an evaluation of whether there's a serious prospect of success, which I think at this point in American history, we really need to see, because we don't have a whole lot of credibility with respect to whether we can win wars the way that we used to. I don't think there's a question being asked which needs to be asked, which is, will the negative consequences of this war, will the evils that the war incur outweigh the evils that we're trying to prevent right now? And are we actually going to end up doing more harm than good in the long run? Now, part of the reason those questions aren't being asked is because if you do any critical examination of the last 40 years of U.S. foreign policy, you'll almost certainly end up answering those questions with, yes, we will create a greater evil than we're seeking to stop, and no, we will not have any serious prospect of the kind of success that the foreign policy establishment is trying to convince us that they're seeking.
Yeah, and a lot of this is deliberate. If you're a hammer, everything starts looking like a nail, because this is the objective here. And I really do believe that there's a lot of these central controllers at the U.S. Pentagon being like, okay, we got to nail down these nails. There's not a lot of nails out there. But if we set up the bases here, if we finance this rebel group here, if we bomb this country and overthrow their leaders here, we'll create a situation where we're going to have a lot of nails popping up out of nowhere, and we're going to have now an excuse to prolong and, of course, worship at the altar the military-industrial complex that, of course, is going to be very happy that these wars are going to be continuing perpetually, and that's the war on terror that is also now turning into the war domestically on the people of the United States, specifically Trump supporters and other fellow Republicans that originally started this war. And I remember back all the way in 2003, 2004, 2005, 2006, screaming, saying, hey, the liberties that you are giving up right now, you will never get back, and they will be used against you. The war on terror will be used against the war on the American people, and that's exactly what's happening right now, and it's terrifying to the degree that we were right, because I didn't want to be right. It was an absolutely horrifying time, and everything the Republicans gave us, it all came back, and it kind of bit him in the butt.
Well, right, and this is something that a lot of critics were pointing out in the early 2000s, but the idea of a war on terror, well, hold on a second, we're going to have a war on a concept or on a strategy? How on earth is that possible? And again, what goal are we seeking to achieve? End terrorism everywhere? Well, the United States is going to end every form of terrorism all across the world, and of course now they refer to anyone who disagrees with them politically as a terrorist.
I had a follower of mine, his name's Dan Holloway, asked me last night, because I was saying we need to withdraw our troops from the 700 plus bases that we have all over the world. And he said, well, Clint, how are we to defend the shipping lanes? And my response to him was, well, first off, these are largely private companies that are ferrying goods all over the planet. Why should it be that the American taxpayer must bear the cost for the protection of all of the entire global economy? Like, in what world does that make sense, right?
It's a fascinating point.
Yeah, but then two, why could they not, given that they have extraordinarily profitable goods that they're trying to ship all over the world, why could they not defend themselves? Why could they not hire either private, kind of mercenary type forces, or have handoff agreements from the other nations' militaries, or at least their navies, as they pass through that territory, basically handoff agreements from government to government? Like, there's lots of ways in which this can be remedied without the American taxpayer being on the line. But the biggest reason that we need to do it is that because you have American servicemen that are in charged with defending the entire global trading system, that means that you are constantly putting them in jeopardy. And if any of them ever perish untimely, it ultimately amounts to casus belli, where you can then justifiably go to war. It's just an incredibly dangerous paradigm to exist in.
I think that you're right, and I don't know that I'm totally sold on the idea. I'd have to think about it a little more, but one argument I can think of immediately in favor of your position of having private security forces that are hired by these multinational corporations that are profiting off of the security doing that work rather than the military is because the Pentagon regularly fails audits on where money that is supposed to be spent on the military is going. It's very likely the case, I would say even certainly the case, that we could have a military just as effective as it currently is for a fraction of the cost. And when you have a private company that's actually required to foot the bill for the securing of those shipping lanes, they're going to do it far more efficiently. Whereas our government, the military, they will just throw money at things. And they'll throw money at things, in ways that are extremely inefficient because they have no bid contracts, and also in ways that suggest there could be some money laundering going on, right? So $50 for a bolt that you can get for 25 cents. You go, all right, is this a bribe? Is this somebody scratching somebody's back? Or are they just trying to launder that money because they don't want us to know about secret projects that they're actually engaged in other countries that they aren't telling the American people about, and they need to secure funding for it some other way?
Yeah, Halliburton,
but that won't happen with a private company that's just hiring security. I'm not saying you're not going to have foul play in the private market because no one ever commits fraud. I'm just saying there aren't the proper incentives for that kind of fraud to exist at that scale.
It's not even a private market. It's a socialized market where a lot of these contracts are no bid contracts. They're guaranteed no matter what. There's no competition. And what do we have to show for the trillions of dollars that we spent on the war on terror?
Well,
we were fighting guys wearing frickin' flip-flops, and we're spending trillions of dollars, and then there's more guys angry at us with flip-flops. And now they're more organized, and now they have our weapons, and now they have our helicopters and our Humvees. We could have done so much with that money. We could have explored space. We could have explored the seas. We could have developed and had so many amazing technological advancements, but so much theft, so much robbery has happened, and we have nothing to show for it.
Or we could have just paid off the debt.
Yeah, well, here's a question I'd like to ask all of you, because I'm really curious about what your answer would be. This is something I wrestle with. And by the way, I just want to make it perfectly clear that the argument I'm about to make, I'm not suggesting that if the wars are actually good for the economy, that means they're moral. I would never make an argument like that. But just as a thought experiment, and out of curiosity, if we know that the petrol dollar is largely propped up by American intervention in foreign companies, if we did pull out, could you not make the argument that the petrol dollar would not have as much value, and all of the money that we spent on the wars would not really have done much good for us domestically because the dollar wouldn't have as much purchasing power?
I would disagree with that, because there's other kind of policies that you could implement, policies that include trade, that include cooperation, that include working together, building together, and doing things like the Belt and Road initiatives that I think are more advantageous for the world. Even if you don't do them from a predatory like colonial way, you could still do them in a way like, hey, they have resources that we want, we have things that they want, let's actually trade here and have prosperous trade that benefits everyone. And I think if you kind of move away from a system that is based on bombing and destroying people, and move towards a system where you trade with each other, that's a system that I think would work way better than everyone else.
Let me add to Luke's point there, because there's two reasons that the rest of the world trades in the US dollar. One is because we'll blow you up if you don't. Two is because it's one of the most stable currencies with the largest liquidity on Earth. It certainly has the most liquidity on Earth. That is the primary reason, though. So if we can actually maintain the purchasing power of the dollar, that still gives the same incentive for these foreign countries to trade in the dollar, which means that you don't have a run on the dollar, which creates a spiraling inflation.
So, by the way, again, just to be clear, so there's no misunderstanding, like, even if the dollar would collapse, right, if we weren't doing horrible things overseas, I still don't think that's a justification to do horrible things overseas. I don't think it will either. Yeah. But my question is, when you say we could maintain the value of the dollar, I'm just wondering, like, how do we do that? Is it not the case that the dollar is artificially propped up by this intervention, and therefore it would lose value, and we would have to figure out some other method of trade or way of retaining our value?
The primary reason that it is it's adopted, though, is because they fear us. But there's also the flip side of this, that it's the most heavily utilized currency. All of their contracts are already drafted with US dollar being the exchange metric. So for them to transition off, which they have begun to do, that takes years. But the reason it's being expedited is because we're now willing to rob a central bank like Russia to the tune of $300 billion because they invaded Ukraine.
Yep.
All of these other nations, the BRICS alliance, which is now expanded to be 9 or 10 nations deep, maybe even more, they are now migrating more aggressively away from us because we are demonstrating that we are not some benevolent dictator or policeman of the world. In fact, we are quite malevolent. And so I think that you can't have it both ways. Like you have to realize the reason that they've been trading in the US dollar is one, because of fear, but two, because we actually maintained our financial well-being as a nation to some extent.
Yeah.
Now we've completely done away with that. The $10 trillion of spending in a 2-year period, of deficit spending in a 2-year period, it's like, okay, we don't have a choice. We have to get off this. We have to trade in something else.
And if you look at what the BRICS nations are doing, specifically with China, with Russia, with Brazil, and many other countries joining that larger alliance, it's almost inevitable now until they're going to flip the script on the U.S. dollar. And we have been doing this kind of carrot and stick kind of foreign policy, but there's no carrot. There's only a stick. I think using a carrot would be more advantageous for the American country and its interests that, of course, could largely cooperate with other people in other countries in a way that doesn't include, bombing the crap out of people and money laundering to the military-industrial complex and indebting this country to the point where the dollar's losing purchasing power anyway. If you look at what you could buy with the dollar, even just a few years ago, there's a big difference than what you could buy with it now.
Don't I know it?
And then you go back to the 60s, my goodness, you go back to the early 1900s, the dollar was more valuable. And this is why it's being just destroyed deliberately by these foreign wars, by these incursions, by this debt, by this Federal Reserve banking system that relies on war, and it's coming to an end. And because of that, there's going to be a lot of pain. There's going to be a lot of suffering, not just for us, not just for the American people, but all the other countries that use the dollar. And this is why the BRICS nations coming and becoming such a formidable threat, it's now, I think, a time to use that carrot, use cooperation. The old model has already been tried so long, and we're losing on it. The dollar's losing value. We're losing our money. We're being indebted, and we have nothing to show for it except for a bunch of Taliban that are now really happy walking around with night vision goggles that we paid for.
I think the carrot you're talking about would be to enhance the value of our exports. And at this point, you say a lot of our exports are now imports. We've given it to the Chinese to build our steel, to drill, to get our whatever. But I think, so an example would be like if we start totally revolutionizing our graphene production industry and the world wants it. The world's like, I want to buy graphene. You're like, well, you can. It's $20 an ounce. Or you can buy American graphene for $5 an ounce if you buy it in US dollars. And the thing is, if you're going to buy graphene, American graphene from the Russians, they might be able to sell it to you in rubles or whatever the hell currency they're using, unless we enforce that with force. But I think at some point, we're just going to have to be like, you want it homegrown, you want the best graphene on earth, you want it the cheapest, you're going to buy it from us.
We got some super chats here that we should get into really quickly. One from Salty Crazy Nick saying, I think the parties have flipped. The Republicans back then are now the Democrats. I could kind of understand that. We got another one from Carlos Esturain saying, Seamus, give us your hot take on fiducia supplicans.
Yeah,
I don't know what that is.
So this is something a lot of people are talking about within the Catholic Church and Catholic circles.
We don't have to get into it now. We could get into it later if you want.
I'm
if
happy
it's
to
a long,
get into it later. Yeah, I think it's a something that I'm surprised I haven't been asked about yet. I read a good chunk of the document. We'll get into it later because there's a lot.
I know Ian likes to talk about religion too, and I think that the conversation could be better better organized for Rumble.
Before we transition to the next topic, I just wanted to...
No, there's no next topic. I want to add on to what we were talking about here specifically, as of course we have this horrible take by the Daily Mail, who wrote this article titled on their front page, Weak, Distracted Biden has let Iran's mullahs get away with murder and now risks an unholy war. Andrew Neil spells out how the appeasing president must strike back with a vengeance to save his own skin and avert disaster. Are you freaking kidding me? You're pretty much saying he needs to cause the disaster so he has to deal with and stop this disaster. What are you talking about here? tell me you're being paid by the military-industrial complex without telling me you're being paid by the military-industrial complex. As, of course, this psychological gaslighting here is a lame attempt to try to justify warmongering, which the United States empire has had way too much of.
That headline was written by Boeing, I swear.
It had to be.
And this is the thing that they'll do. You know, with presidents like Biden or Obama, they'll paint them out to be these peaceniks who are gutting the U.S. military. In reality, they are doing things that are extremely damaging to the United States military, but they're certainly not gutting it. And so if I heard that properly, it sounds like they're suggesting that Joe Biden has just not been bloodthirsty enough. He hasn't been as focused on foreign policy. I mean, Joe Biden has always been a hawk. He was pushing for a war in Iraq all the way back in 1997. This is not some hippie peacenik who wants to dismantle the military.
No. He's never been the anti-war left guy.
Ever.
He's a puppet. He's a puppet politician that literally just takes orders from the special interests guys.
Yeah, well,
100%.
this is also so fascinating to me too. Like, everyone knows that Joe Biden isn't really the president on some level. I don't mean that in the sense that the election was stolen and it doesn't belong to him. I just mean the man is seen. He's just clearly not operating at a cognitive capacity where he's capable of being president. We know that there are people behind the scenes pulling the strings. So the idea that like, oh, Biden just wasn't paying attention to Iran and that's what happened. I mean, the reality is, regardless of why this happened or how this happened, it had nothing to do with Joe Biden not paying attention.
Yeah, and then this is a scary opportunity because they could be using the fact that he's old and senile to push through some of the most unpopular policies, the biggest one of which that they've been dreaming about is this war in Iran.
Yeah,
he is the puppet president. They could be using him as this perfect vessel to push all the things that they couldn't get away with before. Now you have that guy that's going to be out of there because his mind's not there in the first place. Sorry, Clint, you had something to say.
Yeah, I mean, many people have been concerned that the Great Reset will, because it was delayed because of Trump's presidency ever so slightly, that it's now being expedited. And I could definitely see a world in which a larger global war, if not a world war, is necessary to get them back on their Agenda 2030 plan. But the other bigger point I wanted to make is I already gave you the two reasons that the U.S. dollar is utilized in global trade. The third reason is that America, for the longest time, has been not just the apex, but one of the only countries that actually recognizes property rights, has a judicial system that will actually adjudicate contracts or conflicts between businesses all over the world. We were looked at, like, that was part of the reason we were the shining city on the hill. Property rights. I know it's like very boring and it's like a term that most people don't talk about, but the reason that we are no longer looked at as like a safe trading harbor is primarily because our court systems also don't reflect our values. It's very, very dangerous.
That's a good point. No, that's a good point. I totally forgotten about that, but that is a huge part of it, the way the United States emphasizes the value of private property. Yep. And this is also something that factors into foreign investors wanting to purchase up our land. Look, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that it's not something we should be concerned about. We should be very concerned about it. And I really don't like the idea of, people from foreign nations, particularly communist nations, purchasing up land in the United States. But you got to consider that for a lot of these people in China, the incentive structure is such that the only thing they can invest in is property in the United States because the CCP will just steal their money. And I think it's very insidious because then what happens once they own that land in the United States? Does the CCP not arguably end up having some claim to that? And so, yeah, it's extremely frightening, extremely frightening. And it's one of these situations where, because we place such a strong emphasis on property rights and trade and amassed so much wealth doing that, we ended up having this massive target on our back. And that's why countries like China, in large part, want to purchase up so much of our land, because to some extent, even though our country is clearly in decline, we're in a better shape than they are with respect to how our economy is operating at this moment. And so they're going to do everything they can to get their hands on it.
Their real estate market's not doing too good right now.
Yeah.
Sorry, Ian, you had something to say?
Well, megacorps, you talk about foreign entities owning land. That's countries and corporations. Like BlackRock maybe has a headquarters in the United States, but it's foreign to our nationalism. It has no American values at heart.
It's a multinational.
Yeah, and they're big, not just little corporations. Like if you want to make an LLC to own your house, you can do that as a pass-through or whatever. There's ways to have little corporations own property, but megacorps have their own structure and their own interests, like nations.
Think about how sick this is too. Basically, the reason that China is able to export so many goods to America is because our dollar is decreasing in value. So essentially, they sell their goods into a currency that is ultimately fiat worthless, but then they exchange it into hard assets by buying up our land. So we are printing our own demise. People need to understand, you have to connect three dots here, so it's hard for people to do it, but that's exactly what's happening.
And that's why the value of the dollar is just decreasing. And that's why every time you go to the supermarket or the store and what used to cost you $20 is now $30,
So you're
$35.
They'll give us steel, we'll give them U.S. dollars, then they'll give us back the U.S. dollars for land. So we're basically selling them land for steel at that point. We're giving away, we would be authorizing the disbursement of land.
Not just that, but we're also selling our future. Because this is debt that we haven't even paid it off. So we are burying ourselves in an unpayable debt. They are there and then exchanging that debt for hard assets. I mean, if I was the Chinese, I would be doing exactly what they're doing. So it's up to the American people and to the American government to eventually realize it. But to Luke's point, I'm not at all certain that they don't realize it. That they have just sold the American people out because they no longer represent us. They don't have any concern for the American people.
Well, the empire cycle is kind of reaching its crescendo point for America. And I think a lot of globalists and internationalists are realizing that. And we have to give up this kind of notion that they care about America or that their central controllers or the politicians are there for us. They're not.
Yeah.
And they never have been. And you need to realize this because they're selling you out. The Titanic ship is sinking. They're stealing all the silverware. They're stealing all the spoons. You heard that correctly. They're stealing what they can. And then you're stuck on the bottom, literally being locked away, going down with the ship because you don't even have a choice or an option to dive in and out of this empire that is sadly going in decline with individuals like John Bolton, who, of course, took to the internet today and said, quote, "If there was a moment to show American determination, and reestablish deterrence against Iran, it is now. The only effective way to hold Iran accountable is to strike them directly to impose the pain necessary to prevent any further belligerence. We can no longer permit a rogue Iran. Biden must act."
When do people just stop listening to these idiots?
Well, a lot of people have.
At what point, I agree that a lot of people have, but clearly someone still is, right?
Well, I got good news for you. It's that tweet from Bolton has like 100-something likes.
Thank goodness.
So, I can
132 likes.
Yeah, I can tweet out like pee pee poo poo, and I do
Get more than
400
that.
likes.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
like
you should do it right now and see if you beat John Bolton. You should retweet John Bolton saying pee pee poo poo and see if you get more likes than his tweet. See if you can ratio him.
I'm doing that right.
See if you can ratio him with pee pee poo poo.
Pee poo. Poo.
And the idea that
Remember when I
on,
said
so-
I taught Luke everything he knows?
We're gonna
When I
see
was
how
his
this
mentor?
does.
the
You just saw
idea
that in
that
action.
attacking a country directly will make them stop aggressing is the most insane. Like, if you're not going to completely obliterate your enemy in one shot, they're not going to stop.
No,
they're going to
You're
redouble their
absolutely-
efforts.
Well, I think Ian, that's an interesting point. Even though I don't necessarily agree that you would want to wipe them out in one shot, the reality is we have demonstrated in the past that if you fight us for a while, we'll leave. So we strike these countries and they go, okay, well, here's the pattern we've seen in the past. You fight the United States for a while and they leave. So when we strike first, they probably are just going to go, okay, we're going to retaliate for a while and then they're going to get out of here.
Iran's a different beast.
It's going to be interesting to see the actions that they take in Syria against the proxy groups, or if it's going to be against Iran. As of course, John Kirby, he's a part of the National Security Council. He came out and said that, quote, "We're not looking for war with Iran, but we also have another Pentagon spokesperson coming out and saying, quote, we know Iran was behind these drone strikes that took out 3 American soldiers." Now, my question is, how do you know?
Who's
What's,
we? Yeah,
what's
I don't know
the
anything.
evidence? What do you got here? What evidence and proof do you have here to convince us that we should be spending more money destroying more lives on this world?
What are
How
you?
does
Are you an Iranian apologist, Luke? You're going to ask questions? How dare you?
That's
Yeah, how dare we ask for evidence of what's going on here? This, as of course, Lloyd Austin is going to be meeting with Biden in the Situation Room, and Biden is set to announce his actions in just a few moments from now. As of course, it's still insisting that there's not going to be a bigger war here, but how else are you going to do that by attacking Iran? As of course, a lot of people are saying that this is exactly what's going to be happening here. As of course, according to Forbes, Iran is denying any involvement in this drone attack. And the details that we are finding out what happened here was that there was allegedly drone confusion as the United States was flying drones, and at the same time that an American drone was landing, they sent this drone that of course attacked American soldiers on the ground there. With this confusion, the air defense didn't work, and therefore this drone was able to bypass U.S. air defense systems in the region
Air
and take the
defense
lives.
didn't work. Oh, what an excuse.
Yeah, where have I heard air defense systems failing?
That's what
for
happened in
4
Israel
hours?
on October 7th. It's
Yeah, it's also happened in New York and the United
Yeah,
States
they
in
were-
2001.
How
4
convenient.
hours. The best air defense in the world just stood down.
Yo, one missile is not a reason to go to war with a country. One missile.
Well, especially a drone that you can't even identify where it came from. And if you want to make that claim, you better prove it, bro. Like, if you're going to go to war with a nation that is a serious foe, you better have hardcore evidence and you better deliver it to the American people first. They don't intend to do so. I don't believe they will.
That's why you have a Congress to talk it over. And it's also not just Iran, it's all their allies. Everyone that would support Iran would be this is it, man.
Well, the Shiite Muslim world, specifically, that's being very much influenced by Iran, would be involved here.
This is
and
the
that's,
point.
That's a lot of people.
This
That's
is the bigger
angle.
point that I wanted to make is that all of these nations have been waiting for the moment for America to no longer be in a powerful position to maintain whatever dynamics that they want. So you have Russia that moves on Ukraine, totally against the American demand, right? And then you have the Palestinian Gaza war. Now you have the potential for China moving on Taiwan. Now you have these strikes that are coming from the Houthis in Yemen. You have Hezbollah, or excuse me, what did I say, Yemen?
You did say Yemen.
Sorry,
yeah.
I'm getting all these nations combined. You get the point. There's a ton of different venues for which a major war can happen. So what is Iran thinking to itself? Well, we don't have to play with you guys anymore. Iran is already fairly well aligned with Russia. Russia and the Chinese are getting along pretty well. So all of these nations are saying there's too many venues. You can't possibly contain all of them. You couldn't even win a proxy war with the Ukrainians against Russia. You're done. Just back off. We're not listening to you anymore. And that's the reality that the American people need to own up to and realize as well, is that they don't fear us and they shouldn't, because ultimately the only thing we can threaten them with would be nukes, and many of them have nukes too.
Well, not even that. It's fighting them and then leaving all of our weapons and trucks and Humvees and helicopters for them to take it afterwards.
That's right.
Just like they did in Afghanistan. Steph, you have something to say?
I just have a question. So, what's the incentive for these foreign countries to want to have war with the United States?
Only to get the United States to step in its own trap at this point, to get it to stumble forward into something they can't win.
Well, this is what the Daily Mail is arguing. We have a Daily Mail article that reads, "How drone strike death of U.S. soldiers in Jordan takes us a step closer to World War III, as Trump has warned, and Biden's response could further drag in Britain and play directly into the hands of Putin."
Well, this is an important question from Steph that I can definitely answer. The reason that Russia wants to see us fall is because we've now sanctioned them into oblivion. We've armed a neighbor on their border. We've definitely ran psychological operations against the Russian people. We've attempted to coup Putin. We've attempted to arm his enemies. Same thing with Iran. They've been sanctioned into oblivion for decades and decades and decades at the behest of Israel. The Chinese hate us because we've obviously Trump with the trade embargoes and the tariffs. Also, I mean, constant belligerence when it comes to how we talk about their political system. All of these nations have a ton of imperative or necessity to see us at least, if not fall, at least withdraw and stop abusing them. That's the reality. That's the reason that they hate us, and they have a very valid reason to look at us and go like, these guys have made our lives hell. They've constantly, I mean, we overthrew the leadership in Iran in the 1970s, and we've not left them alone since. Why would they not want to see us fall? you know?
As of course, we were also financing the Iraq and Iran war, backing both sides, hoping that they would destroy each other, only, of course, arming them and giving them also chemical and biological weapons before as well. So lots of history there, especially with the overthrow of their democratically elected leadership in the 70s. That was a huge deal. There's still a lot of anger surrounding that, as of course. Like why were we doing all of this? Why does this make sense? Why are we paying for that price now? Again, Israel also is involved here. Israel has a lot of interests dividing the Sunni and Shia Muslim world, because if the Muslim world is not united, they of course are fighting each other, and they're not fighting Israel, as Israel didn't wait, and they actually launched a strike on Syria in Damascus right after this drone attack. As of course we have this article by the AP. You were asking, Ian, if Israel just attacked Syria. Yeah, they've been attacking Syria and hitting them for a very long time, and launching really very dangerous strikes against them, as of course Syria is very close to their border, and Syria has been in a lot of civil strife, as of course the United States financed a whole bunch of Sunni Wahhabis in the region, and it was Iran that predominantly, with their Shiite rebel groups, went after the Sunnis and took down al-Nusra, took down al-Qaeda, took down ISIS in the region that was predominantly financed and propped up by the United States. So these are hardened fighters that of course were fighting against radical Islamists, and they represent the Shiite faction of the Muslim world that now we are going to be going after.
Well, I think everybody, like, I'm curious what you guys thought about my rant a second ago, because, I mean, are we, like, does anybody in this room actually think that the American military can defend Taiwan, Israel, I mean,
Ukraine,
Ukraine, all of
Europe.
NATO, and also the shipping lanes? Can we take out Yemen and like? Tell me, like,
Yeah,
does that even seem remotely feasible?
All right, so I'm a cartoonist, not a foreign policy expert, all right? Yep. But that just seems incredibly unlikely to me, especially when you look at enlistment numbers. We are starving for soldiers right now. How are you supposed to fight all those different wars? Now, I think that foreign policy is also an extremely complicated thing that it's difficult to be able to predict or see down the road with respect to what's going to occur. But I will say this, I mean, it might be possible for us to just have such advanced military technology that we were able to hold our enemies off or win some of these conflicts, but it does seem unlikely to me, especially when you consider where the United States is right now. One thing I can say is if we do or did have a hope of being able to accomplish such a monumental task, that would have more likely been several years ago before we decided to print and spend and borrow trillions of dollars in the single largest redistribution of wealth that has occurred in all of human history.
Bingo.
Where we gave basically every dollar of that bailout, or the largest subsection of it, to the wealthiest people in this country.
But Clint, we can't even guard our own borders.
Loans.
How are you going to guard everything else?
No, it's not that we can't guard our borders. It's that we do not want to. It's that we do not want to, and we are actually going out of our way to prevent local authorities from doing their job. You know, when you have a federal government, the purpose of a higher authority on the chain of command is for them to be able to step in when there is something the lower authority is incapable of taking care of themselves. When it comes to protecting their own borders, Texas is doing everything they can to be able to do so. And rather than the federal government stepping in because they saw that Texas was failing in some way and saying, we can assist you with that, they've actually sabotaged their efforts. That's really twisted. And what it goes to show is that what they want is for our border to be non-existent.
Completely agree.
And so I'll just say this, and I'll add this to sort of our conversation on the decline that's taken place here. And this is something that I actually predicted in a cartoon that I wrote, but this is not some profound point. Anyone who knows anything about econ would have predicted.
Are you working for The Simpsons?
No, but look, they printed trillions, or they leveraged about like 400 billion, or they printed something like $400 billion. The Federal Reserve gave out about $400 billion so they could leverage $4.2 trillion in low interest loans. to give out to the largest corporations in the country. And so what ended up happening? Well, they gave something like $328 billion to small businesses, but the organization charged with giving that money out gives something like 1/10 of that out over the course of a year. And now they had to give 10 times that normal sum out over the course of several weeks. So there was a massive amount of fraud, right? And small businesses stood to lose far, far more by multiples than was actually being given to them. So these small businesses collapse. And then, oh my gosh, all the largest businesses in the country have all of this free money because they were given low interest loans. And what do? They start purchasing up the assets of these small businesses that used to be owned by ordinary American citizens and are now owned by the oligarchs. And on top of that, to add insult to injury, what the government ended up doing with quite a lot of those loans is saying, we're not even going to expect you to pay it back.
Like almost all of them, actually.
Yeah.
They were just ended up being grants, essentially. But then what do? They turn around and they lament income inequality in this country.
That's
and they say, oh, the gap between the poor and the rich has never been higher. Why? Why has it never been higher? Because you shut down all the small companies for years, and then they go out of business, and you go, how could this happen? This is a failure of capitalism. Oh, you mean when you use totalitarianism to shut down all the small businesses?
That's right.
I mean, these people are such scumbag liars. I swear to God.
Exactly. And so that's just a roundabout way of saying that when that's how your government treats the productive element within your economy, why would people want to use your currency?
Yeah. Well, and I think the other reason that many of these nations are showing courage all in tandem is because they realize that our dollar situation is very tenuous. And if we end up trying to fight a multi-front world war, China, like, who are the enemies going to be? They're going to be the nations that are sitting on our treasuries, and they're going to say, "Well, we ain't rolling these over. We're gonna bury the dollar so that if you try and actually go to war with us, you'll have no purchasing power to equip yourself with, and your stockpile's low, and your recruitment numbers are in the gutter. You can't win this war against us." That's what they're saying. This is the reason that they're acting so brazen. The American people don't want to look at it. The political class won't tell you the truth about it, but that is the case. If you actually understand economics, you understand the whole reason that they have courage out of the blue all of a sudden is because they know exactly what I'm saying is the case.
And I think they also know that even if the United States was capable of fighting a war against them, that wouldn't be possible without extreme levels of discomfort for the American people, and we're just not willing to put up with that anymore.
Especially when we're so dependent on China for almost everything.
It's true. Well, for all of our production, right? I mean, during World War II, right? That was no easy task, not merely for the soldiers who went off and fought, but we had a total war economy. Like, everything in our economy was dedicated to the war. We were rationing. Resources had to be treated as if they were extremely scarce because they were more so than ever. If we ever wanted to fight a massive war like that again, especially at this point, people would have to make a lot of sacrifices. And I'm sorry, I just don't think the American people are going to be willing to do that again.
Yeah, you can't be like, hey, give me all the resources, China, that you're collecting in Africa and all over the other developed worlds that you're causing deals with. As of course, China is going to be geopolitically opposed against the interests of the United States. Yeah. And it's going to set up that insidious trap. And of course, you're not going to be able to get your cheap Amazon goods. You're not going to be able to get your slave goods over here on Prime delivery services, as of course a lot of things are going to be very difficult to get, as of course we outsourced manufacturing under a David Rockefeller plan that of course opened up China to the West and the rest of the world. As I got the debt clock up right now showing $34.1 trillion in debt right now, which is absolutely crazy. That number is never going to go down.
Is it going up faster than $100,000 a second?
No.
That's fun to check out.
It's like 2 seconds or 3 seconds.
Is there even an intention to pay it back?
No,
they can't. How are they going to pay it
and
back?
who are they paying it back to, by the way? Who's supposed to get that money?
I mean, they take in $5 trillion in taxes annually. So we would have to have no expenditures for 7 years to pay down the debt. And
I'm okay with that. I'll be fine with that.
I'm okay with that too,
I'll
Luke. But
gladly do that. There'll be less government in my life.
That means all of the social safety net gone. That means no national defense. That means no government employees. I'm good with you too, but I'm just saying they ain't going to do it.
Genuine question: Who is the money supposed to be paid back to?
It's held by pension funds and retirees and foreign nations and hedge funds and I mean it's held
corporations
by
in foreign countries.
Well, and individuals. There's tons of Americans that own that debt.
And there's also something else to consider here. People talk often about debt to GDP ratio, for example, or just the raw amount that we owe. But there's another factor to consider that I don't think is discussed often enough, and that is the amount of interest our government has to pay on the national debt.
Yeah.
So if interest rates go back to their historic average of 6%, based on the amount of debt we had in 2021, we would end up paying 1.7 trillion per year. 1.7 trillion per year just in interest payments. That's not making a dent. That's not making a dent in the actual principal.
That's paying
of
the
what
minimum
we
on
owe.
your credit card.
That's exactly right. So that's going to be, we're going to get to that point if rates go to their historic average, and especially with the dollar losing its value. I mean, we are really headed for some very tough times there.
I don't know if that can be emphasized enough. You got to look up Weimar Germany's hyperinflation. It went from like $20 for an item to $200 for an item, and then like 6 hours later, it's $2,000 for that same item, and you're like, what? The next morning you wake up and it's $20,000 for that item that was $20 2 days ago. Like it went out of control in like I don't know exactly the time limits, but it would be like 8 hours later. You'd be like, I was just here 8 hours ago. They're like, sorry.
That's what people described to me that was happening to them in Zimbabwe. They were like, we were in the supermarket, and by the time that we got in there and the time that we were checking out, the prices doubled. And they were just shocked and surprised because, again, even when I was in Venezuela, I did an inflation tour all around the world, going to some of the countries most hardest hit by inflation, because I see it happening in the United States, and I wanted to learn. I wanted to prepare myself, and I wanted to understand inflation as best as I could. And if you haven't checked out the WeAreChange Zimbabwe report or the WeAreChange Venezuela report, go check it out. You could probably type that in, and maybe, hopefully, YouTube will allow you to find it. But even in the restaurants, when we sat down, all the prices were stickers because they kept changing the price so often that they couldn't have a consistent price of food on the menu, and they kept increasing it by literally stickering it on the top of their menu.
Hypothetically, and this isn't really necessarily a hyperinflation situation, if we're getting our medicine from China and China cuts off trade relations because they declare war or something like that, and now we're going to have to get our medicine through a black market. They're going to have to print money to get that medicine. You could see escalatory hyper. I don't know if that would cause hyperinflation, but that's just like a step falling down the steps. I mean, if you trip going down steps, you're pretty much screwed until you hit the bottom.
Yeah, it's like starting a snowball essentially. Like once we already have a $34 trillion snowball. So that thing, if you just push it down the mountain, it's going to pick up pace and it's going to grow exponentially as it goes down. So we're already there. Now let me spin this positively for you guys, because this is all not doom and gloom. China just had Evergrande, one of their biggest construction companies, go bust. They've been in and out of bankruptcy proceedings for a few years now, but they've been hanging on by a thread. The reason I bring this up as a positive is that China recognizes that their primary way of sustaining themselves as a government, controlling their people, is that they have to export goods to the American economy. We buy all their junk. That's the only reason that they stay afloat. If we stop that, which if we were to go to war, that bankrupts them too. But if we go that route, they're going to stop buying our treasuries. They've already decreased their purchase pace very significantly since 2020. But it kills both of us. Like, it's going to bankrupt China. It's going to bankrupt, like, Russia is actually probably the nation that's in the best position to go to war with America, because they have so little debt and they've already been forced off of the US dollar system and all of the trading or all of the exchange rails that we use. But China would be in a lot of trouble. So that's the biggest enemy that we face, and they don't want war with us. But this is the point I'm trying to make. These countries actually don't want to fight us. It's just that we're so belligerent. They're saying, okay, if we got to, we got to.
Yeah, it's almost as if the United States is preparing Russia for a larger conflict, especially with all the sanctions that they launched against them. And again, Russia, lots of natural resources. They're telling their people to literally have as many children as they can, while here in the United States, politicians are telling you to eugenicize your children.
Yeah.
More on that on Rumble, where,
was,
of course, we could talk about that. We're going to have to transition over. Just hold on a minute there, Ian, for a second, as, of course, we're going to be going over to Rumble and continuing this conversation in a more free and honest way. As, of course, we also have some super chats here that I wanted to address. One from Zach Mines saying, hey, Ian, is there a way I can mail you some magazines? They are from... Hold on, this damn thing keeps popping up here. I can't. Steph, read it. They are from the world's largest gem and mineral show going on right now in Arizona. Ian?
It sounds awesome. I don't have a mailing address at the moment. Do you? In Florida? Because if you send them here, I might get them
I
one
do
day.
not have
No.
one, yeah.
So at the moment, no, I'm not receiving incoming mail. Thank you.
Stephanie? Why? He's talking. Yeah, there you go. Zach Mines.
Thanks, Zach.
Has another super
cool.
chat here. No, not that. That was not Zach Mines. Ian Slater says, hide the spoons. LOL. Are we okay with spoons, or did Seamus take all of them, Steph?
I would not do something
He
like
keistered
that.
him
You
and
guys
ran
know
off.
me.
butter.
You
I was
know
keeping
me.
one in my
You know
room.
that I would never do that, you guys. You literally know me.
You're a pathological liar. I
You
swear to
know
God.
me. I would never do something like that.
Where were you putting them anyway when you were walking out of the room with them? Where
I
were
never
you?
did. I didn't do it. I didn't do it. You guys
All right,
know
well, that's
me.
convincing.
I don't
enough
know
for
where
me.
he was putting them, but
You
if you
guys know me.
if you were
You
to
know I
stop
wouldn't
him
do
and make him
that.
shake his hips, you could hear
You
it
guys-
jingling.
But I thought that was just normal, like Seamus behavior.
I can
You
make a
guys
joke
know
here
me.
that
I
I,
wouldn't
that I
do
can't.
that.
Brass
I
balls
can't make a
kind of
joke that I want to on, but we'll make it on
Hold
Rumble.
the punchline.
I'll hold the punchline until then. Anyway, if you guys appreciate the conversation on YouTube, seriously, go over to rumble.com/WeAreChange. This is the way to, of course, continue the conversation. As, of course, when you go to rumble.com/WeAreChange, we pop right up on the front screen. As, of course, your participation in alternative media platforms are more important than ever. And it's awesome. And it's great to have your participation, to have your support. By the way, there was some technical glitches last night with Zuby, so we uploaded the full 2-hour show in HD so you guys could watch it now. That video available to you from last night, uninterrupted 2 hours. As, of course, now we continue the conversation. Rumble.com/WeAreChange. See you over there right now. Ian, before we transition and cross over, where can people find you?
You can find me on the internet at Ian Crossland, all over the place. And usually every Monday through Friday, 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Timcast IRL. Well, I'll be sitting adjacent to Tim Pool talking about it. I think that's about it. But at Ian Crossland, find me there.
Our grievances against Tim Pool on Rumble.
Yeah, that's right. We're gonna have a real conversation about that.
Damn
You're
right.
sweating. I can see it. You're shining.
I'm like, it's gonna be hard. I'm gonna be a little shaky, but please bear with me.
Seamus,
as
where
I
do people
talk about what's
find
happening.
you and your Freedom Tunes endeavors and everything else?
Thank you very much for asking. So I have a YouTube channel called Freedom Tunes, but if you guys just want to go to my website, freedomtunes.com, and you want to support me and what I'm doing, you can become a member there. And, for your membership, you'll be able to get a bunch of extra cartoons. We have over 50 extra cartoons behind the paywall that only members get to see. We also have extended versions of the web reviews, some that are as long as 20 minutes, one that's actually 30 minutes. And we're going to start uploading our behind the scenes podcast soon, where myself and everyone on our team, we talk about the production of the episodes and also other things related to politics and things related to animation and entertainment and just working in the industry as artists who aren't woke. So go over to freedomtunes.com, become a member, help us support the show, and help good artists working in America continue to create content that isn't woke. Thank you.
Seamus is a liar and depends on Chinese slave labor, and his website is the worstpoliticalshow.com. That's his actual website. Clint?
At Liberty Lock
That's a
Pod.
libel.
At Liberty Lock Pod on X. Liberty Lockdown is the show. Clint Russell's the name. Please do subscribe on both YouTube and Rumble to Liberty Lockdown. I also co-host Tower Gang. Don't subscribe to that. And I am the co-host of The Best Political Show. And please pick up your phone and subscribe to The Best Political Show on your favorite podcatcher. We're putting all these out on audio version. I don't think most people know that because Luke has not done that historically, but you ought to because it's a great way to never miss an episode.
That's cool. Like Spotify, things like that. Awesome.
Professional button pusher of WeAreChange, Steph WeAreChange on Instagram, Steph WRC on X.
Rumble.com/WeAreChange. It's that simple. It's that quick. And it really does make a big difference, especially with all the technocratic gulag efforts implemented by YouTube, especially in an election year where they go overzealously in their censorship efforts. Those censorship efforts will ramp up the closer we get to this election cycle. A lot of people are going to be hit. A lot of people's online independent media careers will be ruined, just like the last election cycle. But you could stop that. You could prevent that. You could vote with your attention, with your clicks right now by going to rumble.com/WeAreChange. It's more imperative and important that you do that